I was there in Tuscaloosa for a big one. Alabama versus A&M came down to the final play of that one. Good stuff, and let's break that down, plus look ahead at what Alabama has with Tennessee. Hendon Hooker versus Bryce Young. We hope we get that matchup. Are we going to get it? We'll talk to an expert on there, Tony Tsoukalas, managing editor there of TideIllustrated.com, joining us. Tony, what's going on, man?
Hey, man, how's it going?
Good. So what a game. We've gotten used to I know 3 years, I guess a couple years ago in 2020, that game got out of hand, but it was a good game till the half. And this A&M and Alabama series really living up to the hype in this past one when most people didn't think it would.
I mean, how often does a team walk off 2 straight games? And it looked like Texas A&M was going to do that, 2 walk-off wins in a row. So that was going to be an interesting storyline. Both games were great. Alabama doesn't get a lot of these great games during the regular season. So if this is going to be a norm, I'm going to be looking forward to this Alabama Texas A&M series moving forward. I could use a lot of these games.
So what's the report on Bryce Young? The talk was if they needed him, which I felt like they almost did need him after those turnovers against A&M, he could have probably come in. What are you hearing about him, about that, and with this Tennessee game?
He asked to come in, or he was, that's what Nick Saban said after the game, that he was kind of asking that he wanted to come in late in that A&M game. There's nothing official yet. They're going to test him out. They're going to go through practice. It's looking more that Bryce Young's going to play than he isn't. I think you might have even been able to play him against Texas A&M because he did throw that week. But I think what Alabama is looking at is they don't want to risk him really re-injuring the shoulder or causing any kind of big damage. And Bryce doesn't want that either. So I think it's going to be like, if he's safe to play, I think Bryce is going to play. He's a gamer. He's not going to want to sit out, which is going to be the biggest game of the year of the regular season, which will be Tennessee. He's going to want to play if he can play. So I think it's going to come down to comfort. And also, if Bryce feels that he can be full effective Bryce, because the last thing Alabama needs is to march him out there when he's not ready, and then to make mistakes in a game like this. But if you ask me to make a guess, just based on gut feeling, I would go with Bryce Young being able to play against Tennessee.
How much of a drop-off was Jalen Milroe? Because I know he had the fumbles, right? But those I felt were created as opposed to him making big mistakes. He didn't pass for a lot of yards, but he did he did run for quite a bit of yards on that A&M defense. So was there a significant drop-off in your opinion?
I mean, yeah, because you went from the Heisman Trophy winner to a guy that was, as Nick Saban said it yesterday, was playing with a lot of anxiety. And I don't think Jalen Milroe is as bad a passer, or, is as far away as a passer as he showed against A&M, but he played like, kind of like a redshirt freshman would play in that situation. And a lot of times, Alabama's obviously wants that standard to be higher than that. But I think when you look at Jalen Milroe, if he did have to go to Tennessee, I think you definitely changed things up a bit. He's a capable quarterback, and you can't ignore the things that he did do, right? He did throw 3 touchdowns in his starting debut, and he did run for 83 yards. And that's, in college football, they take away the yards on sacks, which he got a couple sacks. So, he's a guy that can hurt you with his feet right now. I'm not sure he's a guy that can hurt you with his arm yet, unless he just makes some significant improvements in the next week. So yeah, there is a drop off between him and Bryce Young. But there really is a drop off between Bryce Young and any quarterback in the nation, except for maybe a handful of them.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Let's talk about Hendon Hooker, the best quarterback that you guys are going to face, or Alabama's going to face this weekend. This really, I'm not saying it's going to determine the Heisman, but we're talking about a guy that is, really at the top of that list right now.
If he can beat Alabama, I think you put him right up there in that list. Then he's going to have a game against Georgia as well. So that will be, Hendon Hooker has an opportunity, to make a run at the Heisman. And he's a guy that hasn't turned the ball over. And that's the biggest thing I look at in this game is he hasn't thrown that interception. And Alabama has had a hard time creating turnovers itself. So I think that's a big thing. Alabama's going to have to get more turnovers. They lost the turnover battle 4-1 to Texas A&M. You don't win big games like that. It's a surprise that they beat a team like A&M with having that turnover margin the way it is. They're -6 in turnover margin through 6 games, and that's just not Alabama football. So I think it starts with they're going to have to put pressure on Hendon Hooker, and they're going to have to force him into mistakes.
Jahmyr Gibbs, before the season started, I was shocked that he was getting, Heisman love and that kind of attention because of what he had done at his previous stop. But watching him up close, what a game changer. That guy really is legit. What have you seen from him this year?
he's kind of like an Alvin Kamara type. You know what I'm saying? He's not the big bruising back that Alabama's had in recent years, but he can do everything. And actually, it's been really impressive. The last couple weeks, he's been getting, north of 20 carries. That's not something that he typically does. And that's something that Alabama's called on him to do, especially with running the ball more after Bryce Young got hurt. He's a guy that can hit a big play. He's not necessarily a power back. And if you need that, I think if you needed that like 1 yard at the goal line, maybe he's not your option. But I mean, he can do so many things with whether it be catching the ball, whether it be, running the ball. He's really kind of stepped out as a runner. But, earlier in the season, I know he was Alabama's leading receiver against Texas. You know what I'm saying? So he's a guy that can kind of like swing out of the backfield, or you could line him up in slot. Alabama does a lot of 2-back formations where they bring in Jace McClellan and then kind of have Jahmyr Gibbs out wide. There's just so many things you can do with him. And this Alabama receiving core hasn't gotten a lot of separation. So having a playmaker like Jahmyr Gibbs just kind of throw in there, it's been essential.
What is the outlook for the future of this program? Well, this program, no, but next year, the immediate future. Like, what's the situation at running back? Who's coming and going? Like, is it as bright as it always is, or is there concern?
Oh, I think it's as bright as it always is. And then you also got to think about the transfer portal too. I mean, like the fact that they brought in Jahmyr Gibbs just shows you that like if they have a weakness at any area, they can bring in that caliber of player. But as far as running backs, I mean, it kind of depends on who leaves. Alabama's running back room is stacked, even if without Jahmyr Gibbs. But, if just Jace McClellan leave, or does he come back? And if Jace McClellan comes back, I think he's definitely a really elite running back next year. The wide receiving core has a bunch of players that are just good. I think they just haven't broken out yet. They haven't shown that consistency. So I think that will actually be better next year. Quarterback position, I know Jalen Milroe didn't look, anywhere close to Bryce Young last game against Texas A&M, but I really do think that he could be something special. If he progresses up with the passing, you've seen what he can do with his feet. He's a better runner probably than anybody Alabama's ever had, and that's saying something because Jalen Hurts, could really move with the ball. So I think that, they've also got Ty Simpson. They're bringing in 2 highly rated quarterbacks in Dylan Lonergan and Eli Holstein. So, I mean, they've got a lot of options there. They'll have to find one. Obviously, the future of that offense will be there with that. You go to the defensive side of the ball. You look at, you're going to lose Will Anderson, but you still get to keep Dallas Turner, which is crazy. And he's going to be that new Will Anderson kind of guy. You got a lot of young guys in the secondary. Both your starting cornerbacks are second-year players. So, yeah, the future's still bright for Alabama, and they're recruiting really well. So, as long as Nick Saban's there, he's going to keep on bringing in the talent. But there will be some question marks next year for sure. I think that's pretty much everywhere around the nation, though.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, give me the keys to the game against Tennessee. What has to happen for Bama to come away with another victory?
Well, it's kind of I mentioned turnovers, and I think they're going to have to win the turnover battle. Or they definitely can't lose it the way that they lost it against Texas A&M. If you have Bryce Young back, I think it's a lot easier of a game. Not easier, but you can move the ball through the air against Tennessee a lot better than you can move it on the ground. So if they have Bryce Young, I think that's the key, is just attacking this Tennessee secondary. If they don't have Bryce Young, I mean, you still try to attack the secondary. You give Milroe that opportunity, but I think at that point, maybe you try to do more of a ground control game, play to Milroe's strengths, play to your strengths as a team. Alabama can really run the ball, and you just try to beat Tennessee. I know they have a good run defense, but you try to beat Tennessee's run defense and maybe try to take some of the air out of the game, because you don't want to get into a track meet with Tennessee without Bryce Young.
Absolutely. Tony Tsoukalas, as always, great work on the show, man. We appreciate it. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on.